Hi everybody, and welcome back to this week's video tutorial. Now for this one, it's a watercolor, and I'm going to go to a wonderful garden area called Great Dixter in Sussex. It's the former home of the gardener and writer Christopher Lloyd. Now if you haven't already been there, put it down on your list of places to go, because it's a delightful garden. And it was the lifetime, well, I think it was the lifetime's work of Christopher Lloyd and the help that he had there before he passed. But it's carries on today, and it is just an exciting place to go. I'm not a great gardener, and I'm not a great plantsman in that sense, and I just love going there though. There are one or two places I do like to go. This is one of them. The other one is, I can't think, there is another place that I love to go. Anyway, I digress. The drawing is trying to get all these angles right, and so I'm looking at it from the inside of the barn, so I'm looking at all those lovely contrasty lights, the shadows across the very old flagstones. Now the garden outside is actually a tropical type garden. It's not a native garden. This is a special sunken little garden that's on the walled area of this barn, and it's a delightful place to walk around in, and it's so tall and thick and lush. So I stood on the inside and took some photographs originally, and I've done an oil painting of this. I did it as a palette knife years and years ago for a group, but I felt that it would be nice to do the watercolor version for you guys here on YouTube. Now this is, as you can see, this is a speeded up or time-lapse version of the painting, and it is only sort of 16 minutes or so long. The full version of this, which is an hour and 45 minutes long, can be seen on my Patreon. If you want to get involved with my Patreon, you would be so welcome. I know I do keep on talking about this at different times, but it's a situation where, for me personally, I'm not able to teach many of my students physically anymore, so I've turned more and more to my Patreon to add much more content for my students and for anybody else who wishes to learn from me to get involved with and have a look. And it also helps support me and the efforts that I'm doing, especially right now when the world is in such a crisis. I used a basic coat of raw sienna, and if you look closely, I kept all the white spaces of those wonderful light streaks through the end wall of the barn that will also be used on the flagstones as well, preserving the white space. I'm using a sword liner, a very floppy angular brush. It's a remarkable brush, but it really lends itself to using watercolors in this way, and it's got a really sort of flexible end that you can use the front, the top of it, and the point of it, and the side broad marks. It's so versatile, and I love it. But I was just using it to put some very aureolin and a little bit of cobalt blue in, a little bit darker blues with more cobalt, maybe a bit of ultramarine, just to cool those down. I added actually a little bit of magenta into there just to give me those little red blooms in that middle bay as I'm looking through this. Now I'm actually, that's all dried off, and you can always tell that it just goes a bit lighter from whence I put the colour on in the first place. But so I'm going over with a second layer now, and I'm adding darker greens to those already present, and I'm sort of adding more depth that way. But it's drying off, and it will dry lighter still. And you think you're going to put in a very dark value like I'm putting in now, but if you look a little further on into the video, you will see that those will pale off as they dry off, and you may feel that you need to add some more. So here I'm adding, and I'm being really careful because the light part of those big wooden pillars or support beams are needing protection, so I'm going in. Now in the foreground, there was a lot of, I don't know what, the very large fern type plants, and I wanted to try and preserve those and bring those in, especially later on in the reflections across the flagstones. Now I'm putting a second layer of darks on the internal structure. The beams and the support timbers to the roof have got large areas of dark and light to them, and also the end wall. Bit more warmer on this internal beam. This is the main support beam of the barn, and the huge timbers, I can't tell you, and how old they are, I have absolutely no idea. Extremely old. I don't know how old the property is, but it is such a very, very old building. The main house and the floors inside are all over the show. You know, you couldn't lay flat on any one of them, I don't think. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, I'm sort of adding more and more layers, and now you can see that white paper where I preserved it for the light running through is even more acutely placed because of the darker values I then placed in. I did lift a little bit out towards the bottom. Now I'm putting in the real heavy shadows and the blue violets, and I used ultramarine violet primarily, but I actually tap in a little bit of translucent orange into that. And especially right now I'm starting to put a little bit of orange into some of those reflections of the plants from outside and on the edges of the shadow itself, just warming them up. And now you can see I'm trying to tap in these negative or positive negative spaces of the plants as they reflect or cast their shadows across the flagstones. And this is really what draws me into this picture, are these wonderful and beautiful reflections across the floor, and I've always loved this photo for that very, very reason. Now we are moving on at a pace, and I sort of adding more and more, and I went through several mixes here. I got them wrong. I kept putting a bit of indigo in, but I finally got the one that I wanted, where I actually had more of the violet in there, and you can see I'm going over some but not all of those warmer marks. And just by tapping around with that sword liner brush, it really does excite the surface, and you can lay paint in. And I'm not actually sort of, I'm doing it with an idea of exactly what I want, but you know, the tip taps here on that brush, it's so floppy on the end that actually makes extra marks sometimes that you're not sort of bargaining for, and they often they just excite the whole thing, because you know, they add so much more of a dynamic to the painting stroke, and I really like that about this brush. Anyway, enough about this brush, but if you haven't got one, consider buying one. My one is from a company called Rosemary & Company, but there are other manufacturers out there that do a very good brush of that type too. So look around, see what you fancy, and go for it, but maybe treat yourself to one. Now I'm going in, I'm adding a lot more darks and details, and we're coming towards the end of the painting in terms of the completion of it, and I sort of add more and more darks, and you saw earlier that looked quite dark there when I was putting those in, but like I told you, it would dry up lighter, and it had. So now I'm going back in with a third layer and just adding or adjusting, but I'm not going over the entire area I went over before. Each time I put in a little bit less because I'm refining the detail, and especially now around those blurred red marks that created when I first put in a bit of for the blooms. Now I'm going around them, and by isolating them in a darker color, it makes that pinkish color stand out that much more. And we're coming to the end pretty much of the outside space, and that lovely glow of the light as it pushes its way into the edge of the barn. I say, it's, to me it was an exciting image, and I don't normally do anything to do with flowers as such, as many of my physical students that come to my classes, or until recently did anyway, you know, they will attest to the fact that I just don't paint flowers very often, but this one I couldn't resist it. It's such a lovely thing. Now I'm putting in all these final bits of details, I's and T's I call them, you know, where I'm checking the details, checking what needs to be done a little bit more in terms of deepening value, take the value down a little bit, and adjust the temperatures if I need to make something a bit warmer or a bit cooler, a line here. And it's all these actual lines that have been put in, these little bits of detail with the brush now, that tend to confirm the light, the contrast, and it accentuates the sense of light and the sunlight flooding into this barn area. So yeah, what can I say? I have had fun doing this, but I knew I would, because it's a subject that I've done before, and it really excites me. I'm putting in the details of the flagstones now, the little crevices between each of the flagstones. They're uneven, they're all over the place, they're not in a very set pattern or anything at all. They're just what they are. I used a bit of a warmer value where they were going through the sunshine. And now I'm concentrating on the last part, which are the support beams, and I don't know, I'm not quite sure what you call them, but the thick timbers anyway that hold this structure in one place. Lots of warm colours, and they work beautifully against the cooler colours of both the vegetation outside and also those areas of the shadows across the flagstones. But like I said, if you want to see the full version of this, it will be on my Patreon very shortly. I'm just finishing the edit to that now for my patrons, and that, along with all the other videos that are on there, can be seen and enjoyed. And I'm adding to the titles all the time. It's not something that I'm sort of restricting on. I'm putting as much content on there for my patrons. Good value, long, fully narrated videos for you to learn from. On top of that, I'm also doing a weekly demonstration via live stream for all of my patrons that are on the $10 and above tier, and everyone who's on the lower tier will also be able to see those as a recorded version, but all of them exclusive to my Patreon channel. And I have a wonderful building community of patrons on a private Facebook page that is dedicated just for the patrons, and also a great way of them and I staying connected long term. So I help as many as I can, all the time I can, with the work that they're doing, and also when they're doing little bits of projects like maybe this one. And that's great, because if you like this painting, then why not take a look at it? And I will put on for free to download, purely to learn from, on my Patreon page. Even if you're not a patron, you can go on there, you can download this reference to use it yourself. But why not get involved with Patreon and have so much more on offer? But hey, you don't have to. But it's there if you wish. And if you don't and you want to use the reference, then why not let me have an email and show me the results? Always pleased to see them. And you can always add comments in the comment section below this video, and sort of show me what you've been doing, tell me what's going on and what you're up to. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, because it has been a lot of fun to do, and I sort of got a lot of buzz doing it, and I did it very silently. I just lost myself for a couple of hours painting this without any sound, no narration, and I just enjoyed the whole process. And I hope you've enjoyed watching it at the same time. And like I always say, for every week, if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. It helps me no end to build my channel. Now, the next day I realized that I wanted to take the values of these beams down, so I went back in with a little bit of sienna just to go over the top of them and finished off. There we are. It's a done deal. Catch you all soon. Bye bye.